welcoming Simon Leipold from Donders Institute in Nijmegen, Netherlands. And as a reminder, all the presentations have posters, so if you can't ask your question, don't forget that the presenters are around and they should be standing by the poster. I guess everyone is... Oh, that was yesterday.
That was yesterday.
Ah. Roll back in time but you have maybe uploaded your posters.
Not yet, but I will. Do I need to
Can we have
press something?
Could we have the next presentation? Yep, thank you.
Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Simon and I will talk about the generalizability of so-called naturalistic neuroimaging. And most of this work was performed when I was a postdoc in Ivan Toni's lab at the Donders Institute. Movie watching fMRI has become extremely popular in the last 2 decades. In this paradigm, participants lie in the scanner and they simply watch a movie. And in our case, we had them watch 8 different movies. Many movie fMRI studies calculate intersubject correlations, which are the correlations between the neural time series of pairs of participants. And this gives us a measure of how synchronized the brains of the participants are while they watch the movie. More recently, researchers have become interested in explaining state or trait-based differences in intersubject correlation. For example, it has been found that friends have higher ISC than strangers while watching movies. People with similar political views show greater ISC compared to those with opposing views. And in the clinical domain, there are differences in ISC between individuals with autism and without autism, and there's many more of such studies. Most of these studies derive their effects based on a single movie or maybe a few movies. So here in our paper, we ask whether these effects are dependent on the choice of the movie or whether they might generalize across certain movies. And this generalizability directly depends on how variable the movies are in the ISC patterns they evoke. So if the 2 movies or if multiple movies evoke very similar ISC patterns, we would expect the effects to generalize across movie. However, if they evoke different ISC patterns, we would expect the effects not to generalize. So as a first step, we wanted to quantify the between movie variability in ISC across all our 8 movies. And what we found was that between movie variability in ISC is substantial. So here on the left, you see that different movies elicit ISC to different extents. And this effect of variability is very widespread across the cortex, and it does not only concern sensory regions such as the visual cortex or the auditory cortex, but also higher order regions such as those belonging to the default mode network. And this variability causes trait-based ISC differences to not generalize across movies. So what we did here is we calculated associations between a behavioral measure and ISC for each of the movies separately, and what we found was distinct association patterns for each of the movies. Now at this point you might think, well, different movies are different, so what might be the problem here? Well, the first issue is that at current we do not know what features of the movies drive intersubject correlation, because movies are highly complex and multidimensional, so it's very hard to pinpoint which of the features might be relevant. At the same time, we often lack detailed annotations and descriptions of the movie content, because most papers write maybe 2 or 3 sentences about what's actually happening in the movie. But without this knowledge, we cannot understand where the effects are coming from in the particular study. And more importantly, we cannot predict to which other movies the effects might generalize. And the second issue is that movies are not naturalistic. And you don't have to take my word for it, because by now there's at least 2 papers that make very compelling arguments to this point. And the argument basically boils down to the fact that movies are a type of media that are created with a purpose, for example, to entertain people. Now it turns out that clips that actually do show more natural scenes tend to evoke far less and far less widespread ISC than the Hollywood-produced movies that are made to entertain people. So right now it remains an open question to what extent ISC is actually driven by the most unnatural aspects of the movies, like cuts, zooms, or the soundtrack. So what can we do to improve generalizability of movie watching fMRI? One potential way to do this would be to treat this as a particular case of the so-called stimulus as fixed effect fallacy. So if we include the stimulus as a fixed effect in our statistical model, we cannot generalize beyond the stimuli that we actually used in our study. So just as we include a random effect for participants to generalize across people, we might need to include a random effect of movie to generalize across movies. So this is what we did, and here is what we found. So in these three brain regions, we found a consistent association between our behavioral measure and ISC. And now if you're familiar with the semantic processing literature, and this is kind of the area where our behavioral measure came from, this is an interesting finding. However, in our opinion, this doesn't really fully solve the problem, because even though we're now generalizing across something, we are not really sure what we are generalizing across. So are we generalizing across similarity in content of the movies, in their style, in the emotions elicited? Without knowing what drives the effects, we simply don't know. And a second potential solution for this problem might be to treat different movies as distinct tasks. So just as we do it for conventional task-based fMRI, we would need principal justifications for why we select a particular movie. And importantly, we need to think about and write about what perceptual, cognitive, or affective processing we're actually targeting with the movies. And to help with this, there are by now machine learning-based tools such as pliers that extract numerous features automatically from the movies, for example, linguistic features or auditory or visual features. So with that, then we can actually know what's going on in the movies, and we can actually know about what they're seeing, what they're hearing, etc. And on the subjective side, we might want to collect experience sampling data during movie watching, maybe in separate sessions or in separate samples. So we might ask participants about what they think or what they feel during certain parts of the movies. And this has been shown recently to work quite well in this paper by Wallace and colleagues. And all of this might help us to move away from kind of general conclusions about movie watching towards more specific conclusions about the perceptual or cognitive processing that's actually happening during movie watching. Before I end, I would like to talk about the scope of our findings. We think that these findings may extend to intersubject correlation-based analyses on other naturalistic materials, such as narratives or music, simply because they're also very complex and highly dimensional. I see with other neuroimaging modalities, such as MEG, EEG, or FNIRS. And there's actually already empirical evidence that the choice of the movies matters a lot for predictive modeling of individual traits. And different movies elicit very different intersubject functional connectivity as well. Our findings might be less relevant for within-subject functional connectivity during the movies, although in certain contexts, movies might still matter, as shown in most of these papers here. So there's still a bit of an open question, and it might also be less relevant for GLM-based analysis of events that happen within the movie. So if you're interested in what happened, what the neural responses look like for a certain event within the movie. Our findings are not relevant for so-called encoding models with out-of-sample testing because there the generalizability of the models is directly assessed in novel or different stimuli. So basically in the procedure, this test of generalizability is built in. And with that, I would like to point out that we have a preprint on this online that will be revised soon. And I would like to thank my co-authors and you for your attention. Thank you.
Questions?
Hey, thank you for the talk. So as you've mentioned, we've known in psychology for quite a while through things like the diathesis stress model that fitting the stimulus to your individual differences is really important, matching that stimulus. We've known that for quite a while. Out of interest, could you speak a bit, because I don't know what the behavioral measure you were using was and how suitable you thought those movies were for probing that individual difference?
Yeah, so we thought we matched this quite well because our behavioral measure was semantic representations of novel objects. So the people described these novel objects. And in a pre-test, we asked other people what they associated with these objects, and we chose movies that had objects in them that were associated with these. Also, these movies were quite similar in a way, so we maybe naively assumed that these were good stimuli to kind of associate similarities in these novel representations with the movies. But this was based on our intuition, and I think this might be kind of part of the issue, that intuition might not be enough to just figure out which are the correct or good movies.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, thank you for the nice talk. I kind of have an impression that cultural differences or background might impact the way they perceive the naturalistic movie, and that may have a large impact of how we select the more appropriate movie for the research purposes, and that could also impact the generalizability of the model. So I'm wondering how you, what is your recommendation about how we can consider this in our analysis, especially about intersubject correlation and also study design?
So I didn't talk about this, but of course this makes the problem even more difficult because there is an interaction between what you're showing and your participants' background and culture maybe even as well. So I talked about the movies themselves, but of course the stuff that happens in the movie interacts with your participant, and this makes it even more complicated. Right now, I would just say we have to start thinking about what's happening and quantify what's happening in the movies, and then build on that, because I cannot give a recommendation as of right now what to do, how to select the right movies for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Last question, really, and
So,
short, preferably.
yeah, so the intra-subject, inter-scan differences can also be a random effect. And I'm wondering whether treating the movie choice as a random effect or the effect of movie watching as a random effect makes it harder to distinguish the effect of the movie from inter-scan differences.
Because there's different scans for each movie, do you think? Or I don't think I understand the question.
Like just even without a stimulus, different scans can look different from the same subject. So
yeah.
Did you have to take that into account as a confound, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't really know how to separate this effect from the movies, because the movies were shown sequentially. I don't think there's another way, right? But it was all within one run, if you're asking about that.
All right.
I don't want to be stopping all the fun, but
Yeah.
in the interest of time, thank you, Simon. And,